All right, welcome to The Explainer. So today we're tackling something literally every single one of us deals with, especially as students trying to navigate the wild, wild west of the internet, or even just regular campus debates. We're going to learn how to take those exhausting, super emotional shouting matches and totally transform them into productive, logic-based discussions. You can think of this as your ultimate builder's blueprint for constructing bulletproof arguments. We're going to see exactly how to strip the raw emotion right out of a debate and replace it with solid, totally unshakable logic.
So listen, let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself completely sucked into a comment section shouting match? Or, maybe a really heated debate sitting around the dining hall? You totally know the feeling I'm talking about, right? Your heart rate starts going up, your fingers are just flying across the keyboard, but halfway through it hits you. You realize you're actually losing. And not necessarily because you're wrong, but because you just got way too emotional, or you suddenly realized your talking points were, well, kind of just empty air. Hey, we have all been there for sure, but today we're going to fix that.
Okay, here's our agenda for today. Think of this list as your personal set of cheat codes for mastering the art of arguing. Number 1, the arena of opinion. 2, decoding your claims. 3, building the foundation. 4, testing the structure. And 5, debate without shouting. By the end of this explainer, you are going to sound so much smarter than the folks who are just yelling online. Let's get right into it.
Okay, jumping right into section 1, the arena of opinion. Because before we can build a really great argument, we've got to understand where these arguments actually take place.
Now, what is really fascinating here is the absolute clear-cut line drawn between verifiable facts and mere opinions. See, things that are verified against material reality as strictly true or false, stuff like the laws of gravity or knowing that 2 + 2 = 4, those things are totally beyond debate. Sure, we can always refine our scientific understanding, but material reality just is, right? However, the vast majority of what we actually talk about, our beliefs, our big ideas, our political stances, they don't exist at that rock-solid instant verification level. No, they exist over here, in the arena of opinion. And let me tell you, that arena is exactly where things get super messy.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates what critical thinking actually is in the real world. As students, you're constantly told, you need to think critically. But what does that even mean? Well, it's definitely not just memorizing a bunch of facts for a midterm. Critical thinking is the active examination of opinions. It's treating every single opinion you encounter as an argument that desperately needs to be investigated. You've got to think of yourself as a building inspector. You don't just walk up to a house, look at it, and go, wow, looks nice. No way. You go down into the creepy basement and you check that foundation. You actually attempt to verify it.
Which leads us perfectly into section 2, decoding your claims. Because if we're treating opinions like buildings, we really need to understand our raw materials.
According to the source material we're looking at, every single claim has 3 distinct attributes. The first attribute is figuring out if a claim is subjective or objective. Let's use a super simple cafeteria analogy. If you sit down at lunch and just say, hey, I like Pepsi, well, that's a subjective claim. It only concerns you. Literally nobody can meaningfully debate your own taste buds. But if you stand up on the cafeteria table and yell, everyone should like Pepsi, well, now you've made an objective claim. You're extending beyond yourself and trying to impose a standard on everybody else. Objective claims are totally debatable. Congratulations, you've just entered the arena.
Okay, the second attribute is whether a claim is relative or universal. A relative claim is strictly limited by time or space or context. Think about the weather, right? It's raining here. That is completely relative to your specific location and the current time. But a universal claim, that asserts something about reality in general, like making a statement such as, people are greedy. Universal claims are incredibly heavy. If you try to build an argument using a universal claim, it's like you're building this massive, heavy roof, and it carries a much, much heavier burden of proof. It's super vulnerable to literally just one counterexample, like finding just one single perfectly generous person brings the whole thing down.
So the real kicker is this third attribute. Is the claim descriptive or prescriptive? Descriptive claims are basically like taking a photograph. They just attempt to explain or describe reality exactly as it currently is. Private education exists. Period. That's just a description. But prescriptive claims, those are like a doctor writing you a prescription. They tell us what ought to be done. Private education should be abolished. Do you notice that massive shift? Prescriptive claims absolutely cannot stand on description alone. They desperately need justification to hold up. Basically, they require a rock-solid foundation.
And that brings us right to section 3, building the foundation. Now that we've decoded all of our raw materials, let's look at how we actually construct an argument from the ground up. All right, I want you to basically burn this core mathematical formula of logic into your brain. Premise plus premise equals conclusion. Making a super bold conclusion without any premises is exactly like building a floating roof with zero walls to hold it up. If you just yell your conclusion at someone in a debate, you are not making an argument. You are literally just making noise. Eventually, gravity is going to take over, and that floating roof of yours is going to crash hard. Let's actually walk through a specific example from the source material so you can see this in action. If someone just says, private education should be abolished, like we mentioned, that's just a floating conclusion, not an argument yet. But watch what happens when we start stacking our premises like building blocks. Step 1, our first block. Private education creates unequal access to quality education. Okay. Step 2, our second block. Unequal access to education reproduces social inequality. Boom. Step 3, the roof goes on. Therefore, private education should be abolished. Now listen, whether you personally agree with this specific stance or not, you have to admit the argument is structurally complete. The walls are actually holding up the roof.
And what is so brilliant about this framework is that once the argument is physically built like that, you can actually interact with it properly. You don't have to just resort to yelling at the person. You can question the premises. You can look at block number 1 and calmly ask, wait, does it actually create unequal access? You can reject the conclusion based on faulty blocks, or even propose totally alternative solutions. You've officially moved from a toxic shouting match to a professional architectural inspection.
So let's move right into that next phase, Section 4, testing the structure. Go ahead and put your hard hats on, because functionally, every single argument has to pass a strict building inspection.
Here is your functional inspection checklist. First up, coherence and relevance. Do the premises actually support the conclusion? Like, do the pillars line up with the roof? Or did someone build them way off to the side? Second, material grounding. Are the premises actually verifiable, or are they just merely asserted out of thin air? And crucially, and this is a big one for any inspector, you have to look out for smuggled materials. Are there hidden, completely unacknowledged assumptions just baked right into the foundation? You know, this framework exposes the single most common mistake people make in campus debates or online. People absolutely love to argue the conclusion. They just love pointing up at the roof and shouting about it, while completely, flat-out refusing to argue the premises that actually hold it up. A lot of weak arguments fail not because the conclusion is unpopular, but because the premises, the foundation, are super vague, unverified, or just totally loaded with hidden ideology. And hey, if your foundation is made of sand, the whole house is coming down.
Which brings us to our final stop today, Section 5, Debate Without Shouting. Let's see how we can take this blueprint out into the real world. When you finally start understanding opinions as these structured, built arguments, something kind of magical happens. This massive mental shift occurs. A lot of times, disagreements feel deeply moral or super emotional, right? Like a personal attack. But when you apply this blueprint, you suddenly realize they're usually just disagreements about verification or scope or consequence. You transform what would have been a toxic shouting match into a really genuine inquiry. You literally stop caring so much about who is right, and you start focusing entirely on how are these claims constructed in the first place. I actually want to read this powerful quote directly from our source material because honestly, it sums this whole thing up perfectly. Critical thinking is not about winning arguments. It is about making them intelligible, testable, and honest. And that right there is the golden rule you should take away from this explainer. The goal isn't just to, dunk on someone in a comment section for likes. The actual goal is to build an idea that can survive contact with material reality. So, I'm going to leave you with this final kind of provocative question to chew on the next time you log online or sit down in class. Take a really hard look at your own beliefs. Are your absolutely strongest opinions built on a rock-solid foundation of verifiable premises? Or are they just floating roofs hanging out there in midair, just waiting for gravity to bring them crashing down? Start inspecting your own buildings, guys, and you'll become a master architect of debate in no time. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you all next time.